Hi all, welcome back. I hope you are making the most of this beautiful day as best you can during the current situation. Now we're back here. My name is Jake. I'm one of the reptile keepers here at the park, but aside from dealing with a wide range of reptiles, I also deal a lot with our spider collection. Now our spider collection is primarily made up of funnel-web spiders, and a couple of weeks ago we did an entire video on the Sydney funnel-web spider. Today we're back, we're talking about spiders, but we're talking about them more holistically. We're going to look at a few different species and tell you a bit about Australian spiders. Now, it's actually worked out perfectly. We're out the front of our Spider World exhibit here at the park, right next to Lost World of Reptiles. But we've actually got a wild spider sitting right here in a beautiful big web. Now, this species here is known as the golden orb weaving spider, and they get to be one of our largest spiders. This one here is about average size, particularly for the Sydney region. But as you head further north, particularly up into North Queensland, Cape York Peninsula, you can get some golden orb weavers, this species, up to about the size of almost a dinner plate. So they get huge, and they're well known for making these really strong webs. These strands of the web are extremely strong, and that enables them to catch whatever they want, basically. A really big one could potentially catch a bat or a bird as it flies through the web, but a spider this size is mostly going to be feeding on small invertebrates, so crickets, any of your flying moths, things that are going to land in the web. They can then run to it, they'll grab it, and they'll begin to consume it. Now I can actually see right now that spider's got something which we call a food parcel, which is basically the remains of a previously eaten meal. And you'll notice in front of the spider, we also have a few that have been left in the web. Now the spider's pretty smart. He's done this because the spider knows that this rotting food that's been left over, it's going to attract flies. So he's actually using previously eaten meals to obtain more meals. It's pretty smart, and spiders have been around for a very, very long time. So they're pretty good at doing what they do. Now we're going to leave this orb weaver here. If you've got these in your garden, they don't pose any sort of threat. Yes, they make these big webs that might be in the way, certainly if they were to run them straight across your garden path or something. But if they're out of the way, if they're in a corner of the backyard, just leave them. They're not going to do any damage. In fact, they'll maintain your insect population for you, so they're good to have around. We're going to leave that one there, and we're actually going to head into our Spider World exhibit in here, and we'll look at a few other spiders. This is Bob, our big male animatronic Sydney funnel-web spider. And as I mentioned, we've got a lot of funnel webs here at the park. We'll talk a little bit about them as well. But what I'm going to talk about firstly here is a very small spider, which is known as the redback spider. Now, this is a very famous spider. They are found quite literally right across the entirety of the country. They're not, fussy whatsoever in terms of where they live. As long as it's a little bit warm and they can find somewhere to make their web and they can go about their life, then they will live there. And they are an extremely well-adapted spider to urban environments. If you've got human encroachment, sometimes that can cause damage to certain species of wildlife. Others, like your redback spider and even brown snakes, they're very adaptable to human encroachment. So they're going to be thriving in those urban environments that we create. It just basically creates more spaces for them to produce their webs and reproduce. Now this is a female redback spider. It might be a bit hard to see on this one. It's a preserved specimen, but it would have been quite tricky to show you a live specimen because they are so small. This is about average size, and a really, really large female redback spider, she's going to get to about the size of a pea. So they are an extremely small spider, but in saying that, they are also one of our more dangerous species. We talk about funnel webs being incredibly dangerous, and they are, but funnel webs are quite a sizable spider. Redback spiders, very small, but very, very dangerous. In fact, redback spiders have caused just as many deaths as funnel web spiders have. Prior to antivenom being available, we saw 13 deaths attributed to the male funnel web spider. We have also seen 13 deaths attributed to redback. Now, that being said, redbacks, they have very, very tiny fangs, and you really need to do something what you basically need to do with a redback spider is push it against you. Say it's trapped in your clothing or it's trapped up against something. You need to push on the spider in order for it to bite you. They are a very inoffensive species. They do not want to have anything to do with us. All they will try and do, if they feel like they're being squished and about to die, they'll defend themselves with that venom. Now, like all spiders, the redback spider, the female is the larger of the two. She's quite large in comparison to the very tiny boy. And on the boy, you'll almost see no red. The red is only quite obvious on the female. They have that beautiful stripe that runs along the back, and then a tiny bit on the underside as well. And that's a very easy way that you can tell redbacks from other spider species. Now these spiders, these widow spiders, we call them, that's the family. They're found right across the world: Africa, Asia, the Americas, and of course the black widow spider from the United States is a very, very famous spider. It's their equivalent of our Australian redback spider. All right, now onto one that I'm sure many of you would have seen before. I'm sure you got a huge fright when you did. That is the huntsman spider. Now, quite a sizable spider. They do get quite large, but again, like our redback and like our funnelweb, they are a fairly common species, even within those urban environments. And I can almost guarantee if you were to find a huntsman spider, it's not going to be out in your backyard sitting on a tree. Most people will find these spiders up on their roof or also on their walls. Now, huntsman spiders are extremely good climbers, and they are an active predator. They will move around and actively hunt for their prey. That is where they get that name, huntsman spider, which means they're very, very quick. They're very agile. They can jump around. They're quite terrifying. And if anyone's ever had one inside their house, I think they can testify to the fact that they are quite athletic, and they will give you quite a fright. But in saying that, whilst they are so large, whilst they are so athletic, they're certainly not anything that you need to be worried about. Their venom, it's going to hurt if you were to be bitten by one, but certainly not life-threatening to a human. And like most of the spiders we've seen here today, these will be feeding on invertebrates, which they catch themselves. All right, now we're moving on to a tarantula, an Australian tarantula. This one here we typically call a whistling spider, or some people will even refer to these as bird-eating spiders. And we've got, again, a preserved specimen here, but we also have a couple of live Australian tarantulas over here. And you can see one tucked down just behind this bit of bark here. This is an ideal situation for the whistling spider or bird-eating spider because, unlike other spiders which may sit exposed in a web which is made up off the ground, the bird-eating spider, or our Australian tarantulas, they're spending their time like a funnel web underground in their burrows. So by having this little tube here created with the bark, that spider can feel nice and safe down in there. It simulates a burrow, but at the same time, you, the visitor, can see the spider whilst it's tucked down in there. Now, of course, being a burrow-dwelling spider, what it's doing, it's waiting in there in ambush. That means it's sitting there waiting for something to pass by the entrance of the burrow, and when it does, it's going to run out and very quickly grab it. Now, you might be wondering how it knows that something's walking near the entrance of the burrow. These burrows might be 1/2 metre up to 1 metre in length, so quite deep. But what they do, they actually set what we call trip lines out the front of the burrow, which is tiny bits of web, which will enable the spider to know if something's walked past. They'll feel the slight vibration created by that prey animal. Of course, they then run out, they'll grab it, and they drag it back into the burrow and consume it. Now, these Australian tarantulas, like the funnelwebs, have extremely long fangs, in excess of 1 centimetre in length, so often quite a bit larger than even our Australian venomous snakes. But unlike a funnelweb and unlike most of our Australian snakes, the venom of the Australian tarantula is nowhere near as toxic. Again, like the huntsman, if you were to be bitten by one of these, it's really going to hurt, but not a life-threatening situation. You're going to get a fairly gnarly wound, and it will be very, very painful, but you should be fine. You should probably seek medical attention if you are bitten by a tarantula, particularly one this size or even larger, but again, it's not a life-threatening situation. All right, we've got all of our tarantulas in this room here. We've got a couple of Aussie natives, and then the most of what we have in here is exotic tarantulas from Central and South America. But we're not here to talk about them. We'll go back to our Australian spiders. Just to finish up on, we'll take a quick look at the spider that we work with the most here at the park, and that is the Sydney funnelweb spider. Now, this is a male, and the male is the more toxic of the two. His venom is about 6 times more toxic than that of the female. Now remember I said with the redback, most spiders, the female is far larger, and that's certainly the case for this funnel web as well. The females do get a little bit larger, but it is the smaller male that is the more toxic of the two. So quite interesting, and again, undoubtedly Australia's most dangerous spider, so certainly one you want to be aware of and be staying away from as best you can. All right, well, we might ask some questions, I think. I'm sure there's quite a few. Spiders are one that attracts a lot of interest. They're probably the thing I get asked the most questions about here at the park. People are always very interested in spiders, so fire away.
You mentioned that we work with funnel webs the most. Do you want to go a little bit through the program that we have here for funnel webs?
Yeah, absolutely. So since the late 1970s, we've been extracting venom or milking Sydney funnel web spiders for the production of antivenom. The antivenom for this species was first released in the early 1980s, and since then we have not seen a single death from a male Sydney funnel web spider or a female. Now, it's very important work that we do here, and still today we are the sole supplier of that raw venom for the production of that antivenom program. So it's a very important thing we do here at the park, and we have a very substantial collection of funnel web spiders.
Are all Australian spiders venomous?
They are, yes, and to varying degrees. So of course you have certain spiders like this one here that are life-threatening to humans, but most of our Australian spiders are only using their venom to subdue their prey. Venom is like a modified form of saliva, and it can actually help in digestion. So whilst a lot of creatures will use their venom as a form of defense, most venomous creatures are purely using their venom to aid in that digestion process, and it helps them out. So all spiders are venomous, but the majority are certainly not dangerous to humans.
So what are the species in Australia that are dangerous to humans?
The main two that we would be looking at are the redback spider, which I mentioned, and also the funnel web spider. And to a lesser extent, you also have mouse spiders and trapdoor spiders, which look very, very similar to the funnel web. Those spiders are certainly dangerous as well, as are white-tailed spiders, which are quite small, similar size to the redback. So I guess those 5 spiders are the main ones that would be considered medically significant, and certainly the tarantulas as well. If you were bitten by any of those, you should seek medical attention. But it's only really the funnel web and the redback that may be considered life-threatening.
So what do you do if you are bitten by a spider?
If you are bitten by a funnel web spider at least, what you are going to do is apply a pressure bandage, which I've got in my pocket here. And the reason you would do this is because funnel web spider venom is what we call neurotoxic. It affects your central nervous system, and basically what it does, it causes paralysis. It stops messages being sent between the brain and the muscles. It'll start with droopiness of the eyelids, the inability to speak, and then of course it makes its way through the body. And once your diaphragm becomes affected and your breathing becomes difficult, that's when things are going to start to go downhill very, very quickly. So by applying a bandage, you're slowing the movement of venom down, and you are giving yourself more time to get yourself off to hospital. Now, for a redback spider, our other medically significant species, it's a little bit different. You want to avoid basically using a bandage. What you want to do is apply an ice pack for a redback spider bite. So a little bit different, but still you want to treat it and seek medical attention is the most important thing.
How do spiders make webs?
So what they do, they have what we call silk glands in their abdomen, and then they'll expel that silk, and they use their spinnerets, which is a tiny little point on the end of the abdomen, to assist in weaving the web. Basically what they'll do is start out at one point, they anchor a strand of silk on, and then they work from there. They just go backwards and forth over a period of sometimes only a few hours, and they produce that entire web, which they'll then use to either sit in, as we saw with the orb weaver, or they'll sit down in a burrow lined with the web like a tarantula or a funnel web.
Is it true that they shed their skin like snakes?
They do, yeah. In a spider, we typically call it a molt, and they'll do these throughout their life, mostly when they're younger, They go through a few different stages when they're young, and then eventually they go through what we call a fine or molt, and then they're a mature spider. So they molt more so when they're young, and it's quite interesting. Unlike perhaps a lizard, which might shed in bits and pieces all over the place, a tarantula or a spider molt is typically all in one piece, and it can almost look identical to the spider. So sometimes if you were to quickly glance in a spider enclosure that has a spider in it, you might see the molt and think that that's the actual spider when the actual spider may be down in the burrow. So it can get a little bit confusing sometimes. They almost look identical to one another. We've actually got quite a lot of molts which we might take a quick look at here. A whole pile of them. These are from our exotic tarantulas that I spoke about before. And you can see there's quite a few of them, and they look almost identical to the spider. The only difference is that the molt is basically turned inside out. It kind of pulls off a bit like a sock. So quite an interesting process, and a good little souvenir we like to display that we get back from the spider once it's gone through that process.
What's the biggest spider species in the world, and how big do they get?
The largest spider species is known as the Goliath bird-eating spider, which is found in South America, and they get extremely large. The females could get anywhere up to about the size of a dinner plate, even larger, and that is truly a spider that could consume potentially a small bird. A lot of spiders which you hear referred to as bird-eating spiders are not actually feeding on birds, but they're just used to describe spiders that get fairly large. That Goliath bird-eating spider is certainly capable, and they get extremely large. They are a species that we've housed here at the park previously, and it's a fantastic one for people to come and have a look at.
How many spiders do we have living here at the Australian Reptile Park?
A lot. As I mentioned, most of them are funnel webs. Currently we have about 2,500 funnel web spiders that we're raising up out in our spider nursery, and then on top of that, in our spider venom room just next door, we have about 300 male funnel web spiders which we use for venom extraction. On top of that, we also have our tarantula collection, then a few odd and ends out the back. So all up, I would say we have maybe close to 3,500 spiders. So it's a lot. Fortunately, they're not too much work. They're fairly low maintenance. Like a reptile, they need to be fed reasonably infrequently. Our average is about once a week for most of our spiders for feeding, and most of them here would get crickets as a form of food.
So last question, and this is probably one of the most popular questions that we're asked: why is it important to keep spiders alive instead of squish or spray them?
Well, all through this video I've spoke about virtually all of these spiders consuming invertebrates or insects. Now, insects are obviously very plentiful. You only need to go outside on a warm summer night to see how many moths are flying around. There's flies, of course, during summer. A lot of people are very annoyed by those smaller insects that aren't dangerous, but they're just annoying. So spiders, they help to keep the insect populations in check, and they basically keep everything as it should be, in balance, and they are a very important part of the ecosystem, even though many people don't really see the use in them. We think they're beautiful, they're very important for the environment, and we should always be doing our best to keep spiders and make sure that they're doing what they've done for a very long time. We're going to leave it there, guys. Thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about a few of our Australian spiders. Have a great day, and we'll see you shortly. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.